Hey everybody, it's Dr. Bam, and I really wanted to take a minute to talk about attachments and the importance of attachment in child development and in child rearing and caregiving and all of that. And so when we think about the term attachment, it's used in a bunch of different theories. And we have attachment theory. And by the way, there is also attachment parenting. Now, be careful with attachment parenting. It is not as research backed, and it makes a connection, it says, to attachment theory, but it's actually not based off attachment theory. So attachment parenting is not practical application of attachment theory, if that makes sense. So just be cautious if you fall into looking at attachment parenting. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. It's just not backed through. It's not linked to these theories that we're going to talk about today. So what is attachment? Attachment is that close bond with a caregiver. So remember, it says caregiver. I used to always say mother a lot of the times, but it could be any caregiver, okay? Parent, grandparent, child care worker, if that's the person who's regularly caring. And so sometimes they'll have multiple caregivers, their daytime caregiver and then their parental caregiver as well in the home environment. That really gives that infant that sense of security and safety, right? And so when we look at the concept of attachment, we're usually talking that attachment forms within that first year of life or first 2 years of life, if you're stretching it a little bit. And in attachment, it means that you're safe, secure, and that your needs are being met, right? And there's the confidence that that's going to be provided by your caregiver. And it's important in a number of concepts that we're going to get into. Here it talks about that it's the basics for the confidence for toddlers to go off and explore their environment and to be curious. And it leads into self-concept of who we are. And in attachment theory, a lot of us really look at that there is that influence from that first year of life. The belief is that in that attachment that occurs in the first year of life actually carries throughout your relationships through on. So if you look back at someone who has a very distrust, avoidance style when confronted, all of that, they say, theoretically could get linked back to the parenting that they received in the first year of life. So maybe they had reason to be fearful of one or more of the caregivers, or that their needs aren't going to be met. So in avoidant, they'll actually look to avoid their caregiver, right? Or they'll give preference to a stranger over their caregiver, things like that. And so when we look back for some of these people who have these behaviors in their adult relationships, Freud and some other of these theorists would link back and say that's all goes back to their attachment in their first year of life, that they brought this in, they developed this attachment, and they built their personality and how they interact with the world based off that attachment. So we see here Freud's psychoanalytical theory plays into this, that oral phase, right? That idea that their pleasures are going to be met by their caregiver. Freud would have said their mother, and that they're going to provide that comfort, that need, that security in that first year of life. We can see Harlow's research here was off the rhesus monkeys, right? And he investigated how they explored breastfeeding. And they do say that the attachment that occurs in breastfeeding is very important to building attachment. So in this experiment, you wouldn't do this with children. So they did it with monkeys, right? Very close to how we function. And they separated the infant monkeys from their biological mothers, and they gave them surrogate mothers. The first mother, the wire mother, consisted of a round wooden head, a mesh of cold wires, and a bottle of milk, and the infant would drink from it. The second was a foam rubber form with a heated terry cloth blanket, very comforting, right? And the infant monkeys went to the wire mother for food, but they preferred the other mother for comfort because she had the warm feeling of that body. Now, obviously, we wouldn't do that, but we also realize that a piece of attachment is that we wouldn't do that with with human infants. But a piece of attachment is that contact comfort, that feeling of the warmth and the closeness to a physical, warm body. And this is part of the reason that we really, really, really strongly encourage after birth and in the first year of life to have that skin-to-skin contact, that warmth, that comfort, that security. And it doesn't have to be the mom. It can be a surrogate. It could be the dad. It can be grandparent, caregiver, whoever is able to provide that. Because there's just cases where mom cannot do that for whatever reason. Perhaps she's ill after birth. Recently, one of my friends' daughters had a stroke quickly after she gave birth. And so some of these needs were getting met through other family members and other people due to that for her newborn, because she wasn't able to do some of those things, although they did also bring the baby when they could to the mom. So the main piece of attachment theory comes out of Bowlby, and he worked off of all of this previous work, and he really defined the term secure base, okay? And that is the idea that children need a secure base on which to go out back to. So they can start to go out and explore, but they want that comfort, that secure base, that person's who's going to provide the safety for them. And typically that's their primary caregivers. And his student, so I'm going to go a little bit further down here, Mary Ainsworth, actually created a test or an experiment that's been done and redone and redone. And it's called the strange situation. And in the strange situation, she developed a setup where essentially there is a stranger in there. Mom comes in with infant, sets infant down to play. The stranger's in there. They're having casual conversation, whatever. Mom stands up and leaves, leaving infant with stranger. And most kids get upset. Some don't. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're really not looking at what occurs when mom leaves. We're looking at what occurs when mom or caregiver returns to look at attachment. And you have another question on this piece a little bit, so I'm going to go quickly through this. But she said that we saw certain attachment styles that occurred. So when mom came back, they could be secure, in which sense they kind of go over to mom. They're upset when mom's happy when mom's return, go to get comfort, but then they begin exploration again, right? They're comfortable to go back and explore now that mom's back, and I'm comfortable. And that's all within the secure attachment. So they will get upset when mom walks out, but when mom comes back, I'm happy to see her. I can get comforted by her, and then I'm happy to explore again. And that's a secure attachment. And then obviously the attachment that we want children to have, okay? Ambivalent attachment, sometimes called restraint, right? They're a little bit, when the caregiver leaves, the child becomes very distressed. But when the caregiver returns, they're kind of like ambivalent, like, oh, fine, you're back, right? They may sometimes rush to the caregiver, but still be upset, or they may even push back and resist getting comforted, right, by the caregiver, kind of like almost out of anger. And that's our ambivalent kiddos when parent walks out. The avoidant, we've got to be especially careful with, because when mom walks out, there's really usually not much reaction, or there could be a reaction, but when mom comes back, they're less also likely to explore. But when mom comes back, they may actually go towards stranger and not towards mom, or they may treat them the same. Whether either one. So usually within this situation, we have to be concerned about abuse. Like, why are they not wanting that comfort from a parent? Why are they not worried? And usually it's, in all the other ones, it's because somehow their needs are not getting met. And then a child with disorganized or disoriented are just really inconsistent. They may cry, they may not cry. They may avoid mom when she returns, or they may, fall onto the floor and want to have them and want to be snuggled and all of those things. All those pieces may come into play. So going back up here though, how does that all play into what Erikson says? And so I'm not going to 100% make this jump for y'all because I want to see it come out in your answers. But in Erikson's trust versus mistrust, right, we're learning that through their needs, through whether or not the parent is meeting their needs, determines whether the child will learn to trust or engage in a trusting manner in the world, or lead towards a mistrust, because I'm not going to have a consistent way of having my needs met and all of that. So that's really all I want to say for Erikson trust versus mistrust in the play into this, because I want you to really think about that jump. So what is the connection between what Erikson says occurs in that first year and the trust versus mistrust crisis stage? And we talked about that earlier in the previous unit. So if you need to go back and look at that, you can go back and look at that chapter. And attachment theory, and in the forming of a secure attachment. Okay, so think about the two and think about how they connect in all those pieces to answer your question. Have a great one.